What is going on, Chess YouTube? So in today's video, I want to show you yet another one of the very best games played between Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniachtchi at the 2024 World Blitz Championships. And here we go. In the game, Ian opening 1c4, the English opening, and Magnus going 1e5, the King's English. Then we have knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, and knight to c6. Both sides following the absolute main line and getting all of their knights out onto the board. Now here, the two main options for white are going to be g3 and e3. Now, g3 is a little more common, but in the game, Ian did go for e3. The point being, maybe he wants to go for a very early d4 advance. All right, now here, black. What are his options? Well, the two main moves are d5, heading for a reversed Open Sicilian, and the move bishop b4, heading for a reversed Rosalimo Sicilian. Now, in the game, for d5 played by Magnus, then we have c takes and knight takes, and indeed, it is a reversed 4-knight Sicilian. Now, here, it is white's to move. If it was black to move, the main line would be knight takes c3, then b takes, then e5, knight d5, knight e4, and so on. But instead, it is white to move here, and in the game, Ian finds the strongest idea. That is just bishop b5, putting immediate pressure on that knight on c6, and now, technically, that pawn on d5, or e5, is hanging, as again, that knight is pinned to the king. Therefore, knight takes e5 is a very serious threat. All right, now here, Magnus, how should he respond? Well, the strongest move and the move found in the game is simply knight takes c3, giving up that very vulnerable knight. Now we have b takes c3 and then bishop d6, defending e5 with the bishop and setting up short castles, a very fine plan by Magnus. All right, now we have d4, gaining space in the center, and here is a very critical point in the opening or the middle game, whatever you want to call it. Magnus has many different ideas. For example, you can go queen f6, bishop d7, short castles. Even the move e4 here is quite playable, putting immediate pressure on that knight on f3. Now, in the game, queen f6 played, a very aggressive move. The queen is very aggressively placed on the king side, and Magnus may even flirt with the idea of delaying castling and starting a kingside attack. All right, now, sure enough, both sides do castles, and then castles for Magnus, giving up the option of, say, an early alpha 0 attack. All right, now here, Ian, he's got a few different options. For example, you can go queen c2, rook e1, or even bishop takes c6. In the game, rook to e1 was played, and this move is quite curious. I guess Ian is setting up the idea of, if black takes on d4, e takes d4, maybe he wants to recapture the e-pawn, e takes d4, opening up that e-file for the rook. Beyond that, a very weird waiting move. I'll have to wait and see what Ian has in mind. All right, now here, Magnus. He goes h6, controlling g5, a waiting move of his own. And now Ian, a4, gaining space on the queen side. All right, Magnus, a6, driving back that bishop. We have bishop d3, flying back with the bishop. Maybe Ian wants to go, say, bishop c2, queen d3, and so on, setting up the very powerful battery on this diagonal. All right, now, Magnus, rook e8, getting his rook opposing the white rook on the e1 square, a very solid move. And now Ian, he finally commits to a plan. Now, very importantly, before Ian does move, black has that threat of e4, forking both the bishop and the knight. Of course, rook e8 does set up that idea of e4. Therefore, Ian must react here right away. In the game, knight d2 played by Ian, a very strong move, controlling e4 with the knight, getting out of the way of that e4 advance, and beyond that, Ian's going to have several other ideas here. All right, Magnus, what should he be doing right here? Well, it turns out the engine loves the idea of taking on d4, and no matter which way white recaptures, black will have a very fine game. The main line goes e takes d4, then c takes, then knight b4, jumping in with the knight and pressuring the bishop. The lines are very complicated, but that is the top engine line. Instead, in the game, Magnus goes for a much simpler option. That is just bishop f5, offering the trade of those light squared bishops. Now here, Ian, he has two options as white. Number one, you can trade on f5, giving up those bishops. Bishop takes f5 is perfectly playable. Beyond that, the move e4 is also playable. Try to drive back that bishop, but that line is ultra complicated. Instead of going back, say, I don't know, bishop d7, black has the option there of simply going e takes d4. The point being, after e takes f5, you can recapture on the c3 square, d takes c3, giving up a piece temporarily. That line is ultra complicated, but instead in the game, the simpler option, bishop takes f5 was chosen by Jan. Now, if queen takes f5, then d5, driving back that knight and getting a very asymmetrical pawn structure, as Jan is likely to go e4 at some point. And now here, sure enough, knight a5 played by Magnus, and then e4, gaining space in the center and driving back that queen. All right, now, where is the queen going to go? In the game, queen d7 played. That is the best square for the queen. The other options being, say, f6 or g6, but overall, d7, definitely the best square. Now, this pawn structure, black has a slightly better pawn structure on the queen side. Of course, white has the very vulnerable pawns on c3 and a4. However, these pawns do give Jan chances to fight for an edge here. For example, the open b file and the opportunity for going c4, then c5 do give Jan a lot of active ideas. Beyond that, Magnus, he may want to go for a very fast f5 break. We'll have to wait and see what he has in mind. All right, now here it is Jan's turn to move, and it turns out going c4 immediately is the right way forward. The point being, you are discouraging a very early b5 advance from Magnus. Now, instead of that, knight f1 play by Jan. The point being, he maybe wants to go either to knight e3 or g3 in the spirit of the Roy Lopez opening, where these moves are very, very common. Now here, Magnus, he does go c6, chopping down at the base of that pawn chain, or not the base, but the front of it. And then c takes d5 is a very real threat. Now, Jan, knight to e3, ignoring the threat of c takes d5. Now we have c takes and then knight takes d5, jumping in with the knight. All right, now, very important. Instead of knight takes d5, Jan had the option of going knight to f5 here, followed by queen to g4, and the threats on the king side would be just devastating. Instead of that, knight takes d5 played in the game, the simpler option in this blitz match. All right, now here, Magnus, he's got to find the right response immediately. Of course, Jan is threatening knight to b6. If Magnus ignores that threat, he will be down the exchange very, very fast. For example, I don't know, king to h8, then knight b6 would be devastating. So with that in mind here, Magnus, he does go queen to e6, stepping out of that threat. But Jan, he is not done. Here he goes rook to e3, setting up the rook lift on the third rank. Now the threat is perhaps rook g3, setting up bishop takes h6 ideas later in the game. All right, now here, Magnus, rook a d8, centralizing his rook. And now, sure enough, rook g3 played by Jan, again setting up all kinds of ideas on the king side. You gotta love this kind of rook lift here. These ones are so much fun to play in chess. All right, now, Magnus, bishop f8, retreats the bishop, and that bishop is very well placed on the king side, defending both g7 and h6 indirectly, and this will aid Magnus a lot in this game. All right, now Jan, he makes the first mistake in a very long time. He goes rook to b1, and this move is a little bit too slow. It ignores the idea of f5 from Magnus, and sure enough, here Magnus, he does go f5 immediately, but very fast. Instead of rook b1, perhaps something like queen h5 was the right way forward. Instead, rook b1 and then f5 from the GOAT Magnus Carlsen. He is getting active play on the king side here. Now here Jan, he responds queen to f1, sliding his queen over, a very curious move. And here Magnus has at least two different options. F takes e4 and f4. It turns out here f4 is the stronger response, but instead f takes e4 played in the game. And of course the idea is now the knight on the d5 square is vulnerable. Now here Jan, he sees this and he jumps in, knight to c7, hitting both the queen on e6 and the rook on the e8 square. Now Magnus, queen to a2, flying down with the queen. The point being the rook on the b1 square is vulnerable. Therefore, he has time to save that rook on e8. All right, now Jan, he is not slowing down. He goes bishop takes h6, a brilliant move. The point being, first of all, that pawn on g7 is pinned to the king. You cannot take there, as the king would be under check. Beyond that, the rook on b1 is defended with tempo, a brilliant idea by the super grandmaster. All right, now Magnus, he goes queen takes a4, gobbling up that free pawn. But as you can see here, by the eval bar skyrocketing in Jan's favor, that move was not a good idea. One more time, the eval bar just skyrockets up immediately. Magnus throwing away all of his advantage and is giving Jan a beautiful tactical shot right here. If you like puzzles, pause the video right now. Try to find the key idea for Jan in this position. And while you're at it, go and smash that YouTube like button for more videos just like this. Thank you so much for doing that. All right, the key idea here for Jan is bishop takes g7, blowing open the king side. That would be absolutely devastating. Now, instead, here, Jan, he does take that free rook. Knight takes e8 played in the game. Now we have queen takes e8, flying back with the queen, and then h3, giving his king a little bit of loft on the king side if needed later in the game. Now, Magnus, he knows he's that queen side pawn majority. Those pawns on b7 and a6 are a very powerful asset. Therefore, b5 played in the game, gaining space and setting up ideas like, I don't know, knight c6, a5, a4, and so on. Now, rook a1 hits the knight. Where is the knight going to go? It's going to c4, jumping down across the board. Now we have rook takes a6, gobbling up that free pawn, and then queen to h5 for Magnus, very active with the queen. Now, rook g4, blocking the queen's access on this diagonal and also setting up rook takes e4 ideas. Now, Magnus, rook d7, defends g7 in advance. Then we have queen to e2. Jan is attacking that pawn on e4, ready to gobble it up immediately. Now, queen to f5. And then here, in this position, Jan has an absolutely shocking move he can play to press for the advantage, to press for that win. That is the move, rook to g5. And it turns out the queen has almost no good squares to go to, with this rook covering the 5th rank and this one the 6th rank. So overall, rook g5 would be a very strong move, setting up ideas like queen g4 and so on. Now, instead, in the game, bishop e3 played by Jan, retreating the bishop and getting it out of the way of the future g takes a6 idea if black were to go, say, I don't know, king h8. Now here, Magnus, rook d3, flying down with the rook, then rook to a8, lining up on the back rank, hitting the bishop on f8 to the king on the g8 square. Jan is not letting up, but neither is Magnus. Here, Magnus, knight takes e3, trading off his weak knight for that bishop on the e3 square. Now we have f takes e3, recapturing with the pawn. Now, Jan, his pawn structure is a little bit weaker, but don't forget, Magnus has those two isolated pawns on e4 and e5. Those do not make a good impression. All right, Magnus, rook takes c3 is the move, gobbling up that pawn. And now here, it turns out the key move for Jan is just queen takes b5, gobbling up that pawn as well. And Jan would have a very dangerous attacking position, not to mention being up the exchange. Instead here, rook g3 played in the game, and this move is quite a bit weaker, and it does let Magnus back into the game. Now Magnus, b4, pushing his passed pawn on the queen. That is his way of playing for a win. Now king to h2, king h7, and here again, queen b5 is the key idea for Jan. But again, Jan ignores it. Instead, queen to e1. Jan playing a little bit too defensively, and he is throwing away most of his edge. All right, now, bishop e7 for Magnus, developing the bishop and threatening bishop h4. That would be absolutely devastating. And now here, rook to a7 played by Jan, allowing bishop h4 if Jan wants it. But of course, the problem there is that pawn on g7 would be under the attack by the rooks. Therefore, it is not possible yet. All right, here, Magnus, bishop f6 played in the game, defending g7. But it turns out bishop g5 would be a little bit stronger, as then the bishop would still defend g7, blocking the rook's attack. Now, Jan, rook b7, getting behind that passed pawn, a very good idea in principle. But Magnus, king to h6, marching down the board with the king. Now, rook takes b4, gobbling up that pawn is Jan, but then rook d3, Magnus fighting back. Now, rook g4, bishop g5, rook b takes e4, winning yet another pawn, and then g6, advancing that pawn where it is a little bit better defended. Now, Jan, queen g3, a very strong move, pressuring the bishop, pressuring the pawn on g7 behind it. Jan playing very aggressively. Now, bishop f6, retreats the bishop. Rook to a4, slides over with the rook, and then bishop g5. Magnus making a very big mistake here, and it turns out Jan has just a killer blow in this position to decide the game almost on the spot. If you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the key idea for Jan right here in this position. All right, it turns out the key idea is rook takes g5. The point being, after queen takes, you go rook to h4, forcing out queen h5, and you do win the queen. That would be absolutely devastating. Instead here, rook g to e4 played in the game. Jan still maintains the edge, but that move is quite a bit weaker. All right, now rook d1 for Magnus, controlling the back rank. Queen to f3, offering the queen trade, and now here Magnus, he does go for that queen trade. Queen takes, then g takes, and now Jan, he finds himself in the endgame, up the exchange, the rook for the bishop, not to mention being up one pawn. Jan is going to have excellent winning chances. Let's see how this goes. All right, bishop f6, retreats the bishop, rook to a6, and then king to g7. Now, rook c4 slides over with the rook, bishop g5, rook g5, bishop takes e3, and then rook g takes g6, winning back that pawn. Now, king to f7, rook g d6, Jan offering the trade of rooks. Magnus, he declines. Bishop g1 hits the king, king g2, then bishop d4. But here Jan, the finishing blow in this position, he just goes rook d7. And here Magnus, he resigns on the spot to Ian Nepomniachtchi. The point being, as soon as the king moves, let's say king to e8, then the move is rook to h7, and there's literally nothing you can do to stop rook to a8. There's no way to control that square, and Magnus will be checkmated. For that reason here, back in this position, he simply resigned on the spot to Ian Nepomniachtchi. Wow, what a game between Jan and Magnus in the 2024 World Blitz Championships. Alright, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, smash that like button and comment down below what you thought. And by the way, it's very late at night here. My voice is kind of gone, so I apologize for the slightly worse than usual commentary. Tomorrow we'll be back to usual, but anyways, that is all for today, and I will see you in the next video.